Hey guys, a little bit of a different episode today. Devin isn't able to record, so I thought we'd do something a little bit different. We decided to have James McLeish from That MLS Brit on TikTok. Great content creator. I wanted to get his perspective on the Quakes because I think that the Quakes fans tend to get a little bit carried away one way or the other. So I wanted to see a neutral perspective on how the Quakes are doing this season. We also discussed a little bit about MLS at large, the academy system versus the super draft system. I hope you guys enjoy that, but because we do cover a lot more of general MLS stuff and not just Quake stuff, I'm going to do a separate analysis of the upcoming game against Seattle for you guys. After we do the solo analysis, we're going to cut into the interview with James. So I hope you guys enjoy. What's up, Quakes fans? We are here after our 1-0 victory against Philadelphia Union. Super happy to have 3 consecutive clean sheets, 3 consecutive wins, and 3 different goal scorers. Useni Buda on 2, Preston Judd on 2, and Daniel Muni, of course, on 2 as well. So this game against Philadelphia was our most difficult game by far. I felt that the way that Philadelphia likes to position themselves in the midfield really made it impossible for us to get any sort of progression, through ground passes. And we kind of had to resort to playing Judd over the top. And, that sounds like a bad thing, but in my opinion, it worked out really well. Preston Judd is kind of made for that with his speed and power, so could have been much worse in that regard. For the stats for this game, we actually managed to win the possession game by 52%. I'd be interested to see how the stats looked in the first half because we just kept noting how difficult it was for us to get any sort of progression through the midfield. They did something very interesting where they took their kind of half wingers, half attacking mids, but Indiana Vasilev and Alowski on the other side, they went really tight with their defensive mids, both Jacques and Lukic, and also their fullback stepped up, and that just made it so that when we got to our defensive line, there was really no options for us to play unless we played it over the top. And like I said, Judd is very good at that. So in the first half, we weren't able to score any goals, but we did look pretty dangerous. Thankfully, on the other end, our team was able to defend them just as easily. And so we're still able to keep a clean sheet in this match as well. In the second half, there was a little bit of a change with Ricketts coming off for Timo Werner this time, where in the past we have seen Preston Judd was the one to come off against Atlanta for Timo Werner to make his debut. And so that meant that Timo played on the left primarily, Judd up top, and Buda was on the right. And Buda has shown something that's been very interesting where his play on the ball has been a little bit concerning, to be honest. I haven't been super impressed with how he's been able to progress the ball or take anyone on or really create chances. I don't think that's been his strong suit so far in the first 3 games, especially in this one. This was a really tough game defensively, but his positioning has been the thing that has been super impressive, where he's gotten 2 goals, and both of his goals, obviously, we talk about them because they were assisted by Timo Werner, but what's impressive about them was that he was able to finish them both on his first touch, and that's not something that's new from Buda. He is consistently getting into positions where he can finish on the first touch, and he has a really good finish on him. So, if we continue to see a lackluster performance in terms of his numbers on the ball, that could be concerning in terms of, turnovers and stuff like that. But I do think that it is still worth it to keep him on if he's continuing to get into these spots and scoring these goals. Now, I do think that this game could have very easily been a 0-0 game. It looked like it was going to be that way because of how solid both defenses were. But with that being said, the debutant for Philadelphia, Giovanni Sequeira, 20 years old, it's really hard to not blame him for that goal. A lot of people were also blaming the center back that kept Buda onside. But to me, the more egregious offense is Sequeira being about 10 yards off of Buddha, letting him have that much space. And honestly, he was very fast. Akira is a very speedy player. He almost got to that ball that Buddha eventually finished. But if he was like even two steps, closer, he might have gotten there and made the interception. So it's really fine margins in games like this, but that's where we trust players like Timo Werner to see those gaps and make those passes, and hopefully that continues. The connection between Werner and Buddha has been, amazing. We talked to Buddha in the press conference after this game. He said that the connection between them feels like it's natural. It's not something that they are necessarily focusing on cultivating, but it is, right off the bat, they had a very good connection. So that's really cool to see. But yeah, some more stats from this game. This isn't something that we're super used to, but it does show, how solid our defense was, where we conceded 12 shots and 4 on target. Daniel was able to come up big every time. So, obviously great to have someone like Daniel to be able to, keep these kind of things, in our favor. But it is a little bit concerning that they had 12 shots to our 6. But, in terms of shots on target, we had a similar amount. They had 4, we had 3. So not a complete blowout in that regard. But, still something to note where this attack is producing so far. But against a tougher defense like Philadelphia, we are having less opportunities, and we do still lead the league in expected goals. But, that could be seen as a bad thing if we start to underperform that number, a higher degree. Okay, so we have, if I'm not mistaken, we have 6 goals in 3 games so far, and in that time we've also gotten 7.55 xg, so we are underperforming our xg by 1.55. And so that's like a goal or two we could have scored that we haven't. But like I said, a lot of that could be due to the first game where Jack Skahan missed some really good opportunities that were very close to goal. So that could be the reason for that inflated number. But right now, I'm going to say that this amount of XG that we're creating is a good thing. I'm not going to, look at it and call it out as a negative yet. To me, I think it just means that we're producing really good chances in good areas, like we saw for the Buddha goal. But like I said, there's a point where the disparity between the XG and the actual goal scored becomes really high, and that stops being a good thing, where it says that, your offense isn't scoring as much as they should be. But right now, I don't think it's anything to worry about. But if we move on to the game against Seattle, I took the liberty of watching the highlights for the Seattle match against St. Louis, and it was very interesting in a few ways. I thought that Seattle struggled a little bit when trying to progress the ball out from their defense. They weren't super confident in that regard. They're also missing quite a few key players. Let me list those for you right now. So according to Devin, Seattle is going to be missing out on Paul Rothrock, Yamar, and Jordan Morris, who are all pretty key players for them. Rothrock is a player that I hate playing against because he's a very skillful player on the ball. Also, Yamar is an extremely physical player, and also Jordan Morris is a player where also very physical, but sometimes he doesn't quite show up. But when he does show up, he shows up. We never want to wish for these injuries, but obviously that does play in our favor for this match. So Seattle did end up losing the possession battle against St. Louis. St. Louis is pretty renowned for the way they press. Against Colorado and against Real Salt Lake, Seattle won the possession battle with 64 and 57% respectively. So if we take the average from those two games, it's a very small sample size, but we're just going to do this for analysis sake. We add up 57 plus 64, divide that by 2, we get the average of 60.5, and then we subtract 39 from that number, and we get 21.5. So what that tells us is that St. Louis's high press system made Seattle lose about 21 5.5% possession more than they would have against a regular team. And obviously these numbers aren't exact, but we're going off of what we have so far. Now, why am I telling you about these averages and the percentage of possession and stuff of other teams? Well, I'm getting to that. It's because another high pressing team that we have seen is the San Jose Earthquakes. If we're able to give them a really hard time passing out from the defense, continue to be a high pressing team like we have been this season, we could see a really good result against Seattle if we're able to not only win the ball back in high areas, but also convert those chances. Now, you might be saying, well, Seattle was able to win the game against St. Louis, even though they only had 39% possession. That's true. But if you watch that game, they got really lucky on their goal, where Conrad Wallem basically gave up the ball in his own box to Jesus Ferreira, a very dangerous player who played the ball across, and then they ended up scoring. And with all that being said, it is still going to be a difficult match, but I do think that if we keep playing how we have been throughout the season, we should get a good result against a big rival in the Western Conference. And with that analysis out of the way, I'm going to leave you with the interview I had with James McLeish, also known as that MLS Brit on TikTok. I really enjoyed this interview. I thought it was a very insightful for the different perspective from somebody outside the U.S. And for that reason, I hope you guys enjoy it too. What's up, Quakes fans? Today, Devin's not here to join us, but I am joined by James McLeish, that MLS Brit on TikTok and MLS Brit on Instagram. James, how are you doing?
I'm brilliant, thank you. It's quite late over here in England, but it's a pleasure to be on. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, the complications we had to deal with, you guys have no idea. And with the time change as well, we recently had daylight savings, so everything was pushed forward. And yeah, it's a whole thing. But I am glad to finally have you on. So what I wanted to ask you about is why cover MLS? As a British person, you obviously have, a big time difference as we've already covered. What makes it worth it to you?
It's I do get that question quite a lot, especially over here. If anyone from England finds out about kind of the content I do, then they do ask why MLS. But I guess I would say that I'm also European. I've watched quite a lot of football, especially in England. But I'm someone who's very open to the American sport model. Even when I was like a teenager, I remember in school, I did like a whole project on like the differences between American and like European sport. Like it's I've always been like very interested in it. I played a lot of basketball growing up, so I was I was into the NBA. And so MLS has always been on my radar. I've always I've lightly followed it. And then I would say maybe in the last 2 years, 18 months, I've like really I've started watching a lot of the games live. I had the season pass last year. And this year I've been watching on Apple TV. But I think I got kind of fed up with the Premier League. I watch a lot of lower league football here, and I've worked at a few clubs in the like non-league, and I love that. So I'm very much like fed up of the Premier League and how it kind of there's only maybe 2 or 3 possible winners each year, and how like uncompetitive it can be. And obviously the competitive balance of the MLS, I find it a really attractive selling point from the league. And in general, I feel like it's just a really fun league to follow if you actually do get invested in it. And I think a lot of people in Europe, if the time difference doesn't put them off, then it's just that they don't give it a chance. But yeah, I find it very easy to access all the games now. And to me, also, I would say it felt like a niche as a Brit that I could embrace. Because having like my experience in sports media over here, everyone is obsessed with the Premier League, and it almost felt like it's like what can I do that's maybe a bit different? And obviously there are more reasons why I cover MLS, but it just felt like a unique thing that I could start doing.
So, you mentioned that you had season pass last year. Has Apple TV's acquisition of the league's rights been made it easier for you, or would you say it's more difficult? Because a lot of people are, there's a lot of division on how we feel about Apple TV over here.
Yeah. So before it was split up between like Fox, right, and like what were the other channels? NBC, ESPN, or something. But
I couldn't even tell you. It's
it
really
was
hard to say.
I guess I so if it was on those channels, I obviously don't have access to them abroad. So I guess from an international point of view, um, the Apple TV streaming deal has meant that anyone could watch it anywhere, and it is now very easy to watch. And obviously, in England, I can't even legally watch every single Premier League game because of the rules with blackouts. So it is nice to just have one subscription and pay and be able to watch everything. And as I said, yeah, before I believe it was on like those sort of stations. Yeah, I wouldn't have necessarily be able to watch it before live. So from an international point of view, it's been great, and I think it's better now that it's on the main Apple TV deal and not the season pass. I think that brings more eyes to it as well.
Definitely, that's been a positive change overall, I think. And I have my opinions on Apple TV because I used to not be able to watch the Quakes game if I didn't go to the stadium. There's no way for me to watch it on TV without going to like a bar or something where they're playing it on TV because of those blackouts. And it's like, why can't I watch my own team at my own house? But I see you have a Quakes jersey on. I believe 2017 ish. I'm not
But
too sure
yeah,
about that era, but is that did you have that before this call? Before I reached out to you, or is it like a new acquisition for you?
I this so yeah, it just so happens that fortunately, so I do collect MLS jerseys, and then I like to wear them in my videos because it leaves everyone second guessing which club I actually properly follow. Unfortunately, it isn't San Jose, but
No problem.
I this was actually one of the first ones I got, maybe about a year or so ago. So it just felt fitting to put it on for the video. Because yeah, believe it or not, you can get MLS shirts in the UK like second hand on an app like Vinted or eBay quite easily. There's quite a lot of options. So yeah, I'm always looking for, especially the ones from the that have the old MLS logo on, with like the foot with the boot. I like the more retro ones from like the 2000s,
No,
early 2010s.
100%. I agree with that. I think it's like has more character to it. Like the new one
Yeah,
is it's whatever, but like I love that kind of I don't know. I don't even know like cartoony aesthetic.
yeah,
There's something that, like I said, more character.
definitely.
But are you open to sharing with us breaking the news on who you do actually follow?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the team that I follow most, I do obviously my content. I cover the entire league, and I try to keep it quite a balance. But the team I actually do follow is Charlotte.
Charlotte. Okay, is that
Yeah,
did that have anything to do with Wilfred Zaha or?
actually no. I was very pleased when I would say that Charlotte getting a franchise in the league, if anything, like strengthened how much I would pay attention to it because I've been a not a massive fan, but I've always been like since I was quite young a like a Hornets fan in the
Okay.
NBA, and that was purely because of their colors, their strip colors. um,
I mean, what
because
else
how
is there?
how else would I pick? Yeah, and then obviously I was kind of when I got into NFL a bit, I'd watch the Panthers. So then yeah, so Charlotte just made sense. And it's they're quite a nice club to follow. They do have ambition,
No,
and
they
they're
have.
they're often
Sorry, go ahead.
they're often challenging. It's nice to follow a team that do have like aspirations to definitely like make the playoffs and maybe like get a top four spot and everything.
Right. Zaha's career it wasn't like in his prime, I would say, when he was at Crystal Palace, probably, when he was at his best. But I would still say that he was a European caliber player. So to go after him, that was a really, big statement on their part. Because I actually, it was a kind of full circle moment. Uh, when I first started writing for MLS, I covered Charlotte's inaugural game against DC United, and they've come a long way since that point. They had Christian Fuchs and some good players, but no, they've definitely shown a lot of ambition and they have a lot of character. In they had a man of the match ceremony where they crowned, was it Pep Biel or something like that. I might be wrong
Yeah,
about who that player is,
and you got
but
the throne in the stadium as well. Yeah, yeah,
right.
it's
Yeah,
cool.
we actually had, you're from, Britain, so John Barnes. We had him at our stadium,
Yeah, yeah.
doing the siren bit, and I was like, that's kind of random. Like, yeah, we know who that is, but like, why is he here?
Maybe it
Um,
was just in the area or something. It just
right,
fancied to come down.
yeah. But no. So you mentioned, so the Europeans' perspective on MLS, in general, is not the best. They kind of see it as a Sunday league, type of thing, or a farmers league. Sorry, and obviously I don't share that opinion as someone who's covering this league all the time. But uh, what is your like? How does it feel to be in the midst of that, and then people will judge you for covering MLS and seeing it as inferior?
It is funny because I'll put out a video sometimes, and like I'll think in my head because I do get I get views from America, and I've like increasingly done so because at first I didn't really. And sometimes when I put out a video, I'm like, I really do hope that this gets to the American audience and the actual MLS fans because unless often I do try and put maybe a an EFL spin on some of my videos, or like with Ramsey and Nancy both coming over to Britain. That was a good chance to like speak about MLS, but also because I guess the whole point of what I'm trying to do with my content is to try and show that there are other people that aren't Americans that enjoy the league and like promote it almost to a more international group of people, promote it to like fellow Brits. And whether it's successful or not, I guess we'll see. But I do often think that, like for example, the European mind does often fail to understand why maybe there's no relegation in the league because over here um, football is so deeply tied to like the passion, the fan base over like a compared to a business perspective. And I do think the Premier League is changing in that way, but for the most part, everyone obviously, yeah, it's a lot more like, oh, you've got to, even if you're threatened with relegation, you back your club, whatever, you turn up. But then obviously that does mean that a lot more clubs over here are in threat of ceasing to exist. I know that like American soccer has its rough history with like clubs collapsing, leagues collapsing, but now I do feel like MLS is at a point where it's very stable. There is not that stability doesn't exist here, and you constantly have clubs getting point deductions. You constantly have clubs, and that is maybe part of the game. And a lot of people would say, "I'm happy with watching. I'm happy with watching the Premier League. I'm happy with watching the Championship." Um, but people definitely instantly switch off as soon as they hear the word MLS, and they don't necessarily give it a chance. But I do believe that the league has a lot of opportunity to grow further globally, especially because I think it's got this building reputation of being a league which will produce young talent now. It's not like Saudi Arabia where it is purely for like older stars or people looking to get a big paycheck. But I think that yeah, MLS now has this reputation, especially with clubs like in the English Championship. You've seen a lot of young players go over there now, and I think it is actually becoming now like a respected market for European clubs at least.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a league that gives a lot of time and puts a lot of emphasis on the the products that we export. Like Kevin Sullivan, for example, is probably the biggest and most recent example of like he's going to Manchester City because they think he's the
Yeah,
best teenager in the world. Um, and there's a lot of players that are kind of in that ilk.
I mean, look
I
at the Red Bulls right now
right.
with all their teenagers they're playing.
I spoke to a Norwich fan. I knew him through a friend of a friend, and he had visited to watch the Quakes play, and he liked the game. He said the stadium was nice, but his analysis was that our play was more closely resembling probably League One level rather than Championship, and obviously far off Premier League. Where are you on that? What level do you think MLS is close to?
I mean, I think a lot of players could play in the Championship, and most of the players who have made the jump in the last year or so have taken to the Championship really well. They've adjusted really well. If anything, they've got a bit better. A player like Patrick Agyemang, or like Ali Ahmed recently at Norwich. Well, like Milander has gone into Middlesbrough and been great. So I don't think it's far off the Championship. However, I could see. I mean, obviously, MLS is a huge league. You've got 30 clubs compared to typically 20 or 24 in England, but that just makes it more chaotic. I would say some of those teams that are they're fighting out for the wooden spoon. They're maybe closer, a lot more closer to a League One level. But obviously, some of the best teams in the league would be pushing at the top of the Championship. So I would say it crosses between the Championship and League One. But I would like to say, if I'm speaking positively, that it leans more towards the Championship. And if
Mhm.
anything, the proof is that the players take to the Championship well, coming from MLS. Unfortunately, the managers don't seem to take as well to the Championship as we've seen with Eric Ramsey. But yeah, I'd say between Championship and League One.
I think that is a good answer. It doesn't have to be one or the other, because there's a lot of differences, especially nowadays with LAFCs and Inter Miami being able to bring in players like Heung-min Son, Lionel Messi, best players in the world. A little past their prime, but still very quality players. So you'll see a lot of differences in between those two leagues. But you mentioned Wilfred Nancy and other MLS managers who have gone abroad and had a hard time. Do you think that it's hard to say like because they're not physically playing, but like what is the difficulty right now? Why are they struggling to do better in the European market?
It's such a good I think it's such a good debate right now. I have had to write an article or two on like what it is because we've seen these two managers, two of the better ones in the league that have attracted attention from Celtic and West Brom, come over and it has just gone absolutely awful and it's not helped the MLS's reputation. Um, but I would say that to just brush it off as MLS's tactics not being up to par is quite lazy. And I think it's a mental thing, most certainly, because if you look at Nancy and Ramsey, neither of them had really had a senior role outside of MLS. Um, so that was where they made their name. And even though Ramsey had spent most of his career over here, he still clearly wasn't prepared for dealing with clubs in such a crisis. And I also think stuff like the even stuff like the calendar. No, I couldn't have seen either Ramsey or Nancy just leaving MLS mid-season in the summer. I think they both wanted to see out the year, see out their projects. I know that West Brom tried to sign Ramsey last summer, tried to bring him in, and he basically said no. He waited until the winter, but then because they both came in mid-season, they didn't have a pre-season. They didn't have that time to really build something which you're given often in MLS. You could come in mid-season in MLS, and even if you don't necessarily win a lot of games, it's like, well, you've got time. There's not a threat of going down. Whereas like Ramsey came into West Brom, he had to win because otherwise the club are going to end up in League One. If you get relegated, there's so many financial factors that you have to deal with, your wage budget being cut. So there's so much pressure, and the fan base is so onto you. So I think that it was definitely a struggle to adapt from MLS to the Championship and the Scottish Premiership, and also a mental thing with how comfortable it can sometimes be coaching in MLS compared to Britain.
Right. So it's probably a mix of the different structures just providing different challenges, because, in the MLS, you can, still make playoffs even if you're not the top spot, right? You're not like, and I believe for the championship, it's like the first three or four that are like in contention to go up. Whereas like in MLS, you have like 66% of teams make playoffs, I believe,
Yeah.
so it's much different. And so that's a really interesting point. I don't think I've heard before, but it's weird in Nancy's case where Celtic are expected to win most of their games, and obviously it's more complicated than that. You can't just say you're Celtic and then go out and win. You have to actually back it up. Uh, he took control of a team where there's a lot less parity compared to MLS in my opinion, at least, where Celtic and Rangers are the top two teams in that league, and then the rest of the teams are trying to displace them. Anything to say on that?
Yeah, you can't go into a team like Celtic. It's like a lot of leagues in Europe. You couldn't necessarily go into Bayern Munich and not win the league. It's an expectation, and that's probably not a great thing. I don't think that football should have a league. You should be in a league where you're expected to win, but that is just how it is. Celtic and Rangers, especially Celtic, have just completely dominated. The fact that there's a team in Hearts this year that are challenging is crazy. So I think it doesn't help. It doesn't help that Nancy went into a Celtic team that are very much in limbo. And obviously he tried to instill this identity, right? He has such a strong ideology of how he plays, and doing that, especially without being able to bring in players that might play in that way better, or just having a pre-season to iron out what you want to do. Without that, I don't think it was ever going to go well. And we've seen in comments made by like Celtic players after he left that it just seemed like they never took it seriously from the start. But yeah, I don't know why they brought him in at that time. I feel like it doesn't take a lot to see that maybe he was someone that needs a bit more time, can't be just thrown into a pit of snakes straight away. But of course, it was the end of MLS season, so it was the best time for him to move on as well. So it's a tough one. Yeah.
And yeah, that's really interesting because, like we said, he can't play. He's not out there, and so if they're not taking him seriously, what are they going to do? And the fact that Celtic is such a giant in that league is kind of a double edged sword because, like, yeah, you have the squad to win most of the games, or so that's the theory. But then if you don't win, then then the expectation is like even stronger against you. Whereas like, what are you doing? You have all these good players, and then you can't make use of them. What is wrong with you? And then the players aren't taking them seriously. That's completely. It seems like something that'll turn sour really fast.
I think the fact that his time there lasted 5 or 6 weeks, right? It that the idea of a permanent coach coming in to MLS for 5 or 6 weeks and then getting sacked is absolutely insane. And I think that just highlights like how the leagues are different. They're playing the same game, but uh, yeah, there's still and obviously the players it's a bit easier because they're just playing right. They're playing the same game, but yeah, for a coach, it's I think it can be a bit more difficult, and that's why there's not been a lot of a lot of success from coaches coming from MLS to anywhere, and there's not been many American coaches in like the Premier League, for example.
There, I would say Patrick Vieira, but that's a completely different case for a lot of different
Yeah,
reasons. And obviously he had mixed success anyways, so you can't even say that he's a perfect example of that. But I wanted to shift topics to before we talk about Quakes. I want to talk about the differences in the system. I think you touched briefly on it before, but so in the United States we have the college system, we have the super draft, and that's players who didn't they chose not to go the homegrown route or they weren't offered a contract. They'll go play for their college, and then we've had the Quakes have had players that are the main reason we're doing as well as we are come through that system, like Jamar Ricketts or Daniel Mooney, Reed Roberts. A lot of our players come through the super draft, but there's kind of more of a shiny aspect on homegrown players, and we do have really good ones like Nico Chikaris, very highly touted prospect who was given a homegrown contract at 15, 16. And people want us to like be more like the European system where we're looking at that as more of a priority, like just bring them through academy and then give them a contract and then see what happens. Whereas like not everyone is really ready at that age, and if you're not ready, like Nico Shakaris or Cade Cowell, if you're not like a physical freak at 16, then you're not really gonna get looked at, and then once you're past that point, it's almost too late. But we have like a second chance system here in the states where if you do well on your college team and you're by the time you're 21, 22, then you should be more developed physically and able to keep up with the rest of those athletes. That's a better, I think, metric to judge a player on. And then having both systems, I think, benefits us massively, and we see players come through the super draft and then also go on to Europe after that. Daryl DK is a strange example. He's not doing the most amazing with his injuries, but and also he came through as a sophomore or a freshman, I believe. But regardless, what were your thoughts on the differences in the system? Because I don't think you guys have anything really like that in the UK.
no, I mean, as someone who's at a university right now, um, you know, the same, the equivalent of a college, right? Um, I've been through the first team of the football or soccer, the first team, and there's no one watching it. There's like, there's maybe, I mean, you wouldn't even have family there because a lot of the students, their family are across the country. And they're not traveling to watch that. Like it's and most of those players, they're not ever gonna be playing professionally. They're pretty much there just for fun. I guess maybe like a lower like a lower division of a college, maybe it would be similar. Like they're not, but obviously you have like a Division 1 college. They're players that are they've got genuine prospects of going professional. Um, yeah, it's interesting that there's been a rise in academy football over the last 2 decades or so in America, I guess, and it's obviously does have its European influences. But I think there are benefits to both, as you highlighted. I mean, in this country, it if you haven't made your Premier League debut as a teenager, are you ever going to make it? Well, I mean, obviously, people do make their debuts later, but uh, you're not necessarily going to make your debut for the club you came for in the academy. If you're in the academy and you've not made a senior appearance for the club by the time you're 20, then you're probably going to have to go to maybe drop down, and that's where the second chance thing comes in, um, because the pyramid works. I guess it works fluidly. Like you can very easily go up and down divisions. If a player got released from a Premier League academy at 18, I mean, he could go and play in the fifth division, the fifth level of England, and still play professionally because the fifth division is completely professional, pretty much. So between the fifth division and the first, that's over 120 teams or so. Well, I don't know, maybe 100 teams. So there are still a lot of opportunities, and that's where you find, as someone who's watched a lot of football at the fifth and sixth levels of the game, there's so many players that were in Premier League academies, and that's where their second chance comes, instead of, I guess going to a college. And I just think that the Super Draft is cool as like a novelty. It's cool that they have this system. We obviously don't have it over here, but yeah, obviously it's clear that it's the influence of the draft in MLS compared to NFL. It's so different, isn't it? Like the top picks in MLS aren't even necessarily going to be playing minutes in the league, that they might be in next pro. So yeah, it's very different. I guess you've had a few cases recently of players from England maybe going over to play in the college system themselves, so they see it as a genuine chance to have us to have another go, just going over to a college.
I watch a lot of podcasts like Beast Mode On with Adebayo and Fenwa, and
Yeah,
the players he talks to, some of them like they talk about how you're 16 and you haven't been signed to the first team, and they don't have much money to continue duking it out in the lower leagues where the pay isn't like amazing. A lot of them, for the sake of their family, they have to quit. That's a really unfortunate reality. They can come over here, and that's like a nice idea to come over here and play college ball, but it's not possible for everyone. Like that, it's expensive to make that move anyways, and then you don't even know if you'll be able to get in, at the school you want to go to, or whatever. So to have, I'm not saying that, like, the Premier League should have a super draft or whatever, but just something to catch these players that are like they fall by the wayside, and it's
yeah,
really unfortunate because Antoine Semenyo is someone who, obviously a great player, but he's someone who I hadn't heard about until he got a little bit older. He's 26 now. Say he had to stop at playing at 18 for whatever reason, right? That would be a really unfortunate loss to the league, and someone who's obviously was very important for Bournemouth, was doing well for Manchester City in his own right. That's just an example. Or Jamie Vardy, right? And he's someone who was just very stubborn and kept going, in the lower leagues. But that's not a reality for everyone, where they have to get a job and they don't have time to play football, and just hope for the best, really. Where over here it's really different, where they take care of you more, in a weird way. And it is funny how you mentioned that the super draft is somewhat of a novelty, and that is increasingly true, 'cause it's so different from let's say the NFL, where you get a number one draft, you could have a franchise player forever, right? And that's where the players come from. Whereas here it's like, yeah, Danny Mooney for us is great. We love Danny Mooney. We love Jamar Ricketts. Uh, but they're not superstars in the league. They're not like world beaters. So it's a much different thing.
yeah. Some of I guess you do just in the end get a few players that slip through the cracks, because you can only have so many professional players. It's funny you mentioned about, like, some players genuinely they don't earn enough money from it, so they go and they pick to just get another job instead. At the highest level of, like, semi-professional football in this country, you'll often have some really good players who don't want to make the jump to, like, the lowest rung of professional full time, because the job that they're working, that like as a semi-professional, makes too much money. Like they would be taking too much of a cut. And in general, anyone that's playing in the lower divisions, even if it's professionally, anyone that's playing in the fourth or fifth tier can't necessarily say that their football career is going to set them up for life. So yeah, you've constantly got players thinking about what next, which is a shame because that might have been a player that genuinely did have the capability to go on and play in the Premier League. But yeah, that can sometimes happen. And yeah, it's interesting what you say about the super draft and like college football in general, because you'll even see like colleges these days. It's not like they've just got like Americans there. They like a football program will have like scouted a player from across the world to come and join their school. So even doing stuff like that, it's quite it's like insane how these education systems, sport programs have like scouting departments and everything, because that literally just doesn't exist here.
Right. Yeah, we've seen players like Usaini Buda, who is from Burkina Faso, have to bike to Ghana to play for the Red to Dream Academy, and then goes to high school in America, and now he's fast forward to today, he's on the Burkina Faso national team. So that's just an example of someone coming from abroad to further their career, and thankfully he was seen at that level, and was given that opportunity, because there was probably a lot of players from that area that maybe had a lot of talent as well, but just couldn't cut it. But if you don't mind, I'd like to cut over to the Quakes,
Of
because
course.
that's, after all, is what we're here to talk about. What are your thoughts looking at the Quakes from an outsider's perspective, having won 3 games in a row and not conceded any goals?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I haven't watched any of the games in full or live, but I did make sure that I have watched all of the highlight packages for the games. And I mean, the Quakes are a team that I had down as like my dark horses in 2025 when they brought in like Bruce Arena, Chicho Arango, Joseph Martinez, and everything. I thought that this could be. I mean, obviously they're not going to be the best team in the league, but I was like, oh, maybe this is a team that actually, uh, has a bit of a push in the playoffs. I would have expected them to get playoffs at least, but I guess it was ultimately the defense, wasn't it? Once again, that cost the club. And obviously the season before, the 2024 season, it was the defense was a disaster. So to see them start with 3 clean sheets this year, I mean, it's only LAFC the only other team that have done that, right? It's almost like funny, especially because the players they're doing it with were all pretty much there last year. I must say, when I look at the Quakes, it is a team made out of a lot of players who were there the year before. So something that I would be interested to know is what actually has changed. I mean, I know that I guess the teams that you've faced, the first 3 games aren't the best, and like you obviously got Seattle coming up this weekend. That will be maybe where we really see what they're made of. But I think it's nice to see a team that doesn't necessarily that isn't driven by star power. I know Timo Werner now exists and he's in the picture, but still, it's a team made up of a lot of homegrown players, a lot of names that obviously no one outside of MLS would know, and actually proving they're competitive. So I've been impressed, definitely.
It is really interesting because, like you said, those players that you mentioned, Chicho Arango, Jose Martinez, some of the best players this league has seen. And that's quantifiable numbers that they put up, and they did have really good seasons last year. For if you look at their goal tallies and assists and stuff, and Christian Espinosa, has been with us for a long time. I'm still a huge fan of his, and he's doing well at
Mm-hmm.
Nashville now. But it was kind of heartbreaking to see the start of the season we're losing all those guys, and not just those guys, but also Rodriguez and Bruno Wilson, who we consider to be really good defenders who just had bad games or or unlucky with injuries or whatever it is. We didn't see them as players that were deserving of having conceded the most goals in MLS history, and that unfortunately they were those guys. And like you said, we had these guys last year, but they were like the number two, number three guys, especially with Roberts, probably like the last name on the center back depth chart. Um, but I don't know what it is. I can't tell you, from
Yeah.
from the sideline. But what we heard them say is that they feel like they're running for each other now. Like they feel a sense of togetherness that you can't really, you can't buy that. You can just hope it happens. And Bruce Arena is he's known as the vibes guy because he can kind of make that happen. But also with some of the things that we saw last season, he was really frustrating to watch with some tactical changes where he wouldn't make substitutes or he'd play this guy here when he's not having a great game or whatever it is. It's really difficult to say or put into words because we just look like a completely different team when really we're just like last year's B team almost. We have like players like Ricketts who we're excited about last year, but you know 2 goals in the first two assists in the first 2 games, that's completely unexpected and you can't plan for that. And Timo has been great obviously, but in terms of his output, I'm not complaining about 2 assists in 2 games, but if you look at what goals he actually provided, if he didn't make that assist in the game against Philadelphia, we're still 3 clean sheets in 3 games. We won 2 out of 3 games. That's still a really good output from everyone but Werner, who's I don't think has played a full 90 minutes.
He's not started yet.
No, yeah, but I
No.
mean, like in terms of like if you add up the number that he's played, I don't think it's
Yeah,
adds
yeah.
up to a full 90.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And even him, we saw a lot of people who were Chelsea fans or Tottenham fans kind of making fun of us for being so excited about Timo Werner because let's face it, he was a little bit of a meme over there for how often he'd miss chances. But it's just kind of we see sophistication in the way he plays and just like seeing things that maybe others who haven't played at that level wouldn't see. And so he's been able to pick out passes like the ones to Buddha, no problem. And those have ended up being really, game-changing moments.
I suppose, yeah, what you were saying about like the Werner signing being mocked, I guess there was probably a worry that he was being brought in, like obviously losing. I mean, Espinosa was one of the signings of the winter, right? Like, and Nashville looked brilliant. But maybe there was a worry that Werner was brought in to solve problems, and it was probably quite clear that he isn't necessarily that player. So I think it's been nice that actually the stars of the season so far have actually been elsewhere. It's not necessarily been him, and they've proved that, like, well, yeah, he doesn't even need to be on the pitch to produce success. I mean, like, shout out Preston Judd, like getting his couple goals, and it seems like it is a team of characters who look confident, and like you said, these are players that were maybe backups in previous years, and all it's taken is that them to be given a chance and have confidence and belief in them for this success that you've found so far.
No, 100% agree. And looking at this Seattle game coming up, I've not been able to look at them too much. I've been super busy, but as someone who covers the league, more of a general thing, how do you think that we might fare against them? Because, like you said earlier, we faced 2 really poor teams in SKC and Atlanta, but Philadelphia, not a bad team. They weren't in full health, but still a solid team.
Yeah, I mean, if RSL can get a result against them, then why can't San Jose? Do you know? Is it in San Jose?
Let me check that right now. I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're playing. Yeah, on Sunday.
Because that could really make a difference. I think if you were to travel to Seattle, playing in that atmosphere might have been a lot more of a challenge. But I would say that it will really be interesting to see how they handle playing against a team that naturally has more of a plan and has more of an idea of what they're doing. Of course, Seattle, by all means, aren't necessarily the best team in the league, but they're going to be up there, and they might be competing for a similar position to San Jose in the playoffs. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see how the defense handle things. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the game where you do finally concede. But yeah, no. But I definitely think it's a chance to make a statement to the rest of the league, because right now, like, there will be a lot of eyes on San Jose based on their opening form, but there's always like is this the real deal? I know that you didn't start badly last year. I think like winning like your opening couple games. So yeah, it's a chance to let the league know that you're a real deal, or it might be that kind of it's an opportunity to maybe see where, because it's not going to be perfect, right? Like the team isn't going to be 100% perfect. It might have been a perfect start, but there will still be areas of the game where like Bruce Arena wants to improve on. So it might be a chance to, like, Seattle might be the sort of team that expose that and kind of make it clear what still needs to be worked on.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting game because I felt that for the first two games at least, there was a clear thing that we had that countered, what they had. I felt like we have a really high press, and Atlanta and Sporting Kansas City, they weren't able to deal with that. And we kind of predicted that, going into the game. You mentioned that like we've it's still early on, and we had a good start the last year. But when we talk to Bruce Arena, and every time I try to ask him like, how do you feel about the season? Like, how do you feel about the success we've had? It's like too early to say anything. He doesn't want to give us any sort of. He doesn't want to give himself any credit to let us down later in the season, which I understand. But I did want to ask you, looking at our highlights so far in the first three games, who's a player that has impressed you other than Timo Werner?
I think, I mean, obviously it's been quite nice that it seems like the starting 11 has pretty much been very similar. It's been the same players playing week in, week out. I like the look. I thought that Bolaru had an excellent passing range to him. I was really impressed by the vision on some of his balls that he played.
I'm glad you see it too, because we're always talking about Bolaru.
Yeah. So definitely him. I think Asini Buddha has looked very lively on the wing. Obviously he was a player that I think I first really looked at when the AFCON was on a couple months ago. I know he didn't actually play much at all in the end, but just kind of definitely that got flagged up that he was an international. But yeah, he's looked lively so far, and I think that is it Chakaris. Chakaris. Yeah, he's looked like a very creative player as well. And then of course the centre back partnership, right? Like you don't, and I guess the goalkeeper. Like you don't keep clean sheets for no reason. So Robertson, Mooney have handled the start to the season excellently as well.
Yeah, I think that you named a great couple of players there. Useni Buddha is someone who I was, because I saw him, come through to college, and I saw him play for the second team.
Yeah.
Leading up to his inclusion with the first team, and so I was like, guys, just trust me, it'll be good. And he hadn't, really felt like he established himself until like maybe late last year, early this year. And so to see him doing well, obviously, is a huge. I feel so validated, and hearing you say he's one of the guys who stood out to you. But yeah, I think that's gonna be the end of our show. James, where can the people find you?
So I'm on TikTok at that MLS Brit, And I also have an Instagram page, which is just MLS Brit.
Yeah, guys, I recommend you check them out because I see a lot of people covering MLS as being in the business myself, and not everyone has too much passion for football. I don't think that's the case here. I think that James has actual passion for the sport. Actually knows what he's talking about. So if that sounds good to you, go ahead and check him out.
Yeah, thanks. See you guys.